Hello, hello, people from the world. Thank you so much for joining us. I hope you enjoy the time in between talks, that you got a bit of some tea, some coffee. Thank you for joining us from everywhere that you're around. In Automation Star, we got more than 600 people from 45 different countries. Right now, we have people from 42 different countries. We have people from Costa Rica to Australia, plus everyone that is in Europe at the moment. So thank you so much for being part of this. In the conference, you have the speakers, you have the fun, we have the sponsors as well. So thank you so much for being part of this virtual event as well. You might feel a bit more in the virtual conference knowing that they are around. They are so yeah, that's part of it. But let's go into our speakers. That is the core of knowledge and the core of getting to develop more abilities in our professional lives. It's time to go with the last thing that I want to share with you before we start. For the ones that were with me before, you already know this. For the ones that are just coming now, I want to share with you that there's nothing like meeting with the community in person. You should have seen, we're going to meet now Abigail and Oleksandra, but in Automation Star, they had a topic table. So people could actually have interactions with them. It was great. Dave Farley was there as well, but like 17, 18 people around him. So there's nothing like meeting with the community live. We are always online. We're always having these meetings. But if you want to meet, just for being part of this online community, I bring you this code. So webinar 15, we're going to Oslo in the summer. So I hope to meet you all in person there. And thank you so much for being here. But it's time to go with the main part of this talk. And it's introducing to you both Abigail and Oleksandra. How are you doing?
Good. Excited to be here.
Yes.
Oh, we're
hi.
so excited to have you.
Good.
Thank you so much for your time and for sharing the knowledge. And I will leave you. The floor is yours. And again, thank you so much for being part of this virtual day.
Thanks for having us.
Yes, thank you so much, Joseph, for having us and for such a great introduction. And yes, you're right, community on Automation Star was just incredible. So my name is Oleksandra, and I'm here today with Abigail, and we are going to talk about innovating test automation in a multi-brand regulated context. So I'm joining from a beautiful city of Stockholm, where I live and work. Unfortunately, today it doesn't look this nice and sunny, but lucky for us, we have the best, how we say, kanelbulle in English, cinnamon buns, sorry. We have the best cinnamon buns in the world, as I believe. And together with me, again, I have Abigail.
Hi, so I'm Abigail Kauki, and we both work for FDJ United. I am a test automation manager. Oleksandra is a test engineer in my department. And I come from Malta. And I cannot not show you some nice pictures from Malta. It's compulsory for me. So here is a photo of the Mosta Church. This is from the town where I come from. It's the third largest unsupported dome in the world. Beautiful. And this is what it looks like during the festa that we have in August. Lots of nice fireworks, music, and so on. It's like a massive street party. And this is a photo from my favorite kayaking spot. It is actually a collapsed cave in the north part of the island, close by to where I live. And it's got the most beautiful, deep blue, clear sea, as you can see. And it's amazing swimming there in the summer. But if you've seen me talk before, you might know me from Kindred Group. But now we are called FDJ United. And this is because just over a year ago, we've been acquired. And this is a news article from that acquisition. And FDJ United is one of the top 3 lottery, betting, and gaming operators in Europe. It's quite big. So we've got 33 million annual active players, and more than 9 million of those are online. We also operate the Irish and the French national lotteries, and we got 34,000 points of sale for that. It's quite big, so we're about 5,000 and more employees, and we operate online in 10 European markets. and 100% of those are regulated or on the path to regulation. So through the acquisition of Kindred Group, we became part of the OBG, the online betting and gambling business unit, as part of FDJ now. And from Kindred, we brought 9 online gaming brands and 1 games operator. Oleksandra and I work on the gaming brands, so the 9 that we see there. Now, our setup, so we work for a department called PAM, Player Account Management. And the department has 3 verticals made up of product teams. And inside those 3 verticals, there are 40 teams in total and about 500 employees in the department. Oleksandra and I work as part of the test navigation team, TNT, and we span across the 3 verticals. And our purpose of the team is to drive quality and efficiency across teams by leading high-risk testing, building shared tooling, ensuring environment stability, and providing training and strategic support. So what makes our work challenging? So these are the 9 brands that we deal with. And these 9 brands are live on 1 or more markets. And I put down the flags of the markets that these brands are live on. And each market can have some variations in the features, in the regulations, and so on. But across these 9 brands, there's also more than 380 components. Some are shared, some are specific to those brands and markets. Not only that, but we also have different environments, some test environments, production environments, and so on. And to top that off, we operate in a highly regulated industry. We're heavily audited, and if things go wrong, we get big fines. And it's not just about the money, but we also get bad reputational damage if we get a fine. So we really want to be avoiding those fines. And we've got market-specific requirements, meaning different flavors of the same feature. And given that we've got the different environments, it also means that we've got components, be it front-end or back-end components, might be on different versions, on the different environments. And that's why testing is important, especially since we've got more than 13,000 releases a year. So this is what brings us to Automation Star. We live in a world with a lot of complexity, and automation is important to us to make sure that we have some confidence in these releases that we're doing. I'll give you some background to our test automation strategy and the foundations of what makes this. So I'm going to talk through the basics using a deposit limit feature. Now, a deposit limit is one of our responsible gambling features where a customer can choose to say that, well, I'm going to gamble online, but I'm going to restrict myself to only, for example, allow myself to deposit up to 200 euros a month because that's what makes sense for me, that's what's reasonable for me, and it's what I can afford. Then our systems won't let the customer deposit any more money. So they set a limit at a specific time frame, and that's how they can control themselves and not let themselves get carried away. So to test this, the steps would be the customer visits our site and logs in. We check that the login is okay. And then they go to the deposit page and set the deposit limit. Then to check whether that deposit limit worked, we go to the deposit page and we try to deposit over that limit to see that we are blocked from doing that. Now our end-to-end test strategy is that since we have different components for the different parts of the journey, we can test those components separately. So for example, we can check login separately. So we would have a login specification where we log in, check the UI is successful for login, and then we can also do an API call to make sure that everything is okay. The next part of the journey is the deposit limit. And deposit limit is a separate feature and a separate component that we can also test in isolation, but to make sure that we can release it separately as well, we want to ensure the two parts. So we can set state by logging in using an API call, setting cookies, and so on. Then through the user interface, we go to the deposit limit page, set that deposit limit. And then to make sure everything is okay downstream, like in the database and so on, we make an API call to the microservice to make sure that deposit limit has been set. Then the next part of the journey is the deposit page. So again, for the deposit test that we take separately, we log in and we set the deposit limit through API call. So this is setting state. Then we go to the deposit page from the UI and check that we cannot deposit over the limit. And even though we wrote these three tests separately, when we're doing all those parts correctly, when we put them together, we have the confidence that the customer journey as a whole works. And one of the benefits of that is that if there is a UI failure early on in the parts of the journey, so for example, if there is a problem in the login and the login test is failing, we can still get results for the later parts of the journey. But yeah, so these are the foundations of our end-to-end strategy. Now I'll hand over to Olex to tell us a little bit about actually, with one bit is that this logic can be used across multiple journeys, not just this one. Now, Olex can go on and tell us about the previous setup that we had.
Yes, thank you so much, Abigail, for describing how we actually approach, in general, our test automation, given well, the context we operate and develop in. So, yes, our previous setup, we had one repository for all these sites that we have, and one site is consisting like on one brand that is live on one of the markets. So we had very easily, we have set up, first of all, the folders for each of the sites. So let's say we have 32 Red International, then we have Bingo Finland, and we have Bingo International again, and we have Bingo Sweden. What's not? They were actually very more, because given the 9 sites in 35 markets, there are a lot of brand and site combinations. So we have here also Casino Huone and many more. So for each of the sites, inside this folder or for the site, we had different spec folders. Here you can see we have authentication folder, for example, we have cashier, casino games, and so on. So given our test automation strategy, where we check each part of the flow in isolation, we have implemented this spec folder. So in authentication, for example, we are checking login via UI. All the rest checks are happening via API. For example, in the cashier, where we're checking, let's say, deposit or withdrawal, we perform user creation and login via APIs and setting the mandatory limits via APIs, and then we perform to check the core flow, for example, deposit via UI. Now, yeah, and we have many more sites, of course. Now, how do we orchestrate all this stuff? Well, we used to have the configuration file, single configuration file for all these sites, and where each object was containing the information regarding this site. So, for example, here we have site Bingo UK, we have some base URL, of course, for this, we have jurisdiction, locale, brand, and other information that is required to have our test run for multiple sites. We also have implemented at some point some reusable commands. So for example, here we can see successful login flow. It was implemented as a separate reusable command that we could use further on in our specs. But the issue is that since we were copy-pasting those specs, we have the same specs in each folder. So we had to use the same reusable command, let's say for the login in 32 Red International site, but also in Bingo Finland site. Yes, we had to use also some translation files to make this reusable commands work, because we have to do quite in-depth testing, and we are checking all the texts, specifically, of course, compliance and regulatory texts that are present on the site, which means that our reusable commands cannot work for each locale. So to handle this, we have created these translation files where we just grab respective object and we use it according to the site that is assigned in the config file. Yeah, let's take a look how we were actually working with this. So how would we approach adding the new spec? First of all, we would add the new UI command, yes. Then we would add a translation file. But then we will go and copy paste the use of this command in each site spec file. So for example, here we have responsible gaming navigation, we have command, we have translation file. Okay, but then we use this command in each site spec. So each site has its own specs, and then I go and use this command for Bingo Finland, Bingo Sweden, and so on. You can see there are a lot.
But then does that mean that you are sharing the translation files and the commands, but then you're repeating the spec file?
Yes, exactly. You can see we were repeating each spec file, which means a lot of copy pasting, you know, our favorite two keys, Control C, Control V. That's not it. Now we had to maintain all this, of course, this framework. So let's say deposit model has been changed by one of the development teams. This is what usually happens, right? And deposit model is roughly the same in all the sites. How will we maintain this deposit model? So we will go and implement the change in one of the sites. Let's say I would pick 32 Red International, for example. Then what I would do usually, I will do copy paste the same change into the next site. Let's say Bingo International. Again, I would need to go and copy paste the same change in the next site, Bingo UK. Then again, copy paste, and so on down the line until you copy paste everything. Now, to summarize all the challenges, of course, copy pasting of the same spec file for each site. And this results in a huge maintenance scope and a huge code base, which is really difficult to maintain. Now, if there was anything good about this setup, well, yes. One good part was that all the differences between those sites would reside in site-specific spec files. So for example, if we have some A/B testing going out or gradual new feature rollout, we will update only affected specs. That was the good part.
But wait a minute. So here's what's going on. So I've had a chat with our architects, and they are telling me that our components are actually, so we have sites that are made up of components, but then we're sharing some. Let me show you in this diagram. So here is a visual of what our sites look like. So we've got our brands, Unibet, 32 Red, Otto, and so on. And those little red dots, they are signifying the components between in the different sites. But some of those components, they are the same in between the sites. So I highlighted those in purple. So our sites look something like that. So essentially, a lot of the components are being shared, and there are only a few site-specific ones. And well, in the previous setup that we've seen, you're telling me that we have a folder for each brand and market combination. And then inside those folders, you're having specs that you're then copy and pasting. But then what about then there are some of those where it's being repeated, right? So those shared components are the ones that we're copy and pasting. But what if instead of doing that, we mirror our architecture and reuse the tests that are reused between our sites, reuse the set test of the reused components, right? So then when we are asked, can we verify that the site is working, whether it's up and running and it's okay? We then can have our pool of tests, so kind of something like this. And we'd have an end-to-end folder with our specifications. And those are all the specifications related to the components, whether they're shared or not between the sites. And then when we want to create this new test for a brand and market run, it's like going shopping, right? So we can pick and choose the components or the tests of the components that we want to run and put them in our shopping cart, figuratively. And then when we pick and choose those, then we can just run them. And we can create any test suite for any brand and market combination by picking the components that we want. And then if we don't have that in our shop, then we can create those new specs for the components that are specific to that brand and market combination. But of course, we cannot call this the test shopping architecture, can we, Alex? That nobody would take us seriously. So let's call it the composable test architecture. Do you think this will work? We've tried it, right? Let's see.
Yes, so composable test architecture, unfortunately not the shopping cart. So we tried this approach and let's see how it worked. So first of all, as was mentioned before, we have eliminated all these site folders from our folder structure, and we have brought up all the feature folders to the surface, basically. So here they are reflecting, we have folders that are reflecting the features. And we know that if we have some market-specific features, like, of course, we know about those. This is our product. And then we just decided, okay, we will create a separate feature file for these variations. For example, here we have card deposit general spec file, and we have variation for the Netherlands, which is _NL, and the same for UK. And the same for the contact preferences. We know we have variations for Sweden and for UK, but the rest of the markets are the same. So that's why in contact preferences we have 3 feature files. But okay, it all sounds good. Let's take a practical example. So we run these features for markets and brands based on component differences. Okay, so we have these brands, for example, the list of our brands, 09, and we have them live in several markets. Just to make it simpler, I have listed 4 markets here: international, Sweden, Netherlands, and UK. And we have 2 mini apps with 2 feature folders: card deposit and contact preferences, just reusing the same. So I have denoted the card deposit variations with purple figures, just so it's understandable, and contact preferences with the red figures. How will we choose? So this is easy. We know that in international markets, card deposit is, well, one of the common ones. So for international, I pick card deposit. For Sweden, we know it's exactly the same as in the rest of the markets, nothing special. So for Sweden, we also pick card deposit with the circle. In Netherlands, though, card deposit has some different features because of regulator requirements, compliance, what's not. So we have created a different spec file, and I'm picking this spec file denoted with the purple triangle. And the same for UK. UK is special, it has their own features, so we pick a different spec file for UK. Now, you might guess that for contact preferences, we will just do the same. Again, looking at the red figures, international is a common spec file, so we pick a circle. Now here Sweden is different, it has some different features in contact preferences, so we have to pick a separate spec file, the one with triangle. Netherlands, the same, okay, use generic one, but UK is again special, so we had created a separate feature file and we pick here this red square. Now, okay, but we cannot have a shopping cart in our repository, or can we? Actually, we love shopping. Yes, we can. So what we did, we have extended our configuration file with specs to run array. And actually in this array, we put specifically the spec files that we are going to run for each site. For example, here you can see 32 radio UK. Inside we have specs to run array. And in this array, we specify which spec file we will run. And the whole idea is that we just compose, this is why it's composable test architecture. We compose the test suite per site from the specs we want to run. And we know as test engineers which specs we have in this site, of course, we know. And this gives us the whole end-to-end confidence that the site and its features is working properly as it should. Now, still looks good. What did I do? Sorry. Going back here. Yes. Still, to maintain all of this, we had to stick to some data files like translations. And we also had to introduce the dates files because, well, based on each locale, dates format is different, of course. So we maintain these data files. And again, the bottom line of all of this is that we configure the test suite per site and we run only what is required. We reuse spec files for different sites as much as possible and as much as feasible. And new spec file, we create a new spec file for significant differences in component implementation. Okay, again, we tried and it looked good, but how is our everyday work looks like currently? Let's say we need to add a new spec. So this is how it looks like. First of all, we investigate the differences between all those component variations, and we add the spec file for each variation. Then we add the data and necessary objects, of course, and then we just pick which spec we will run for each site in the config file. And that's it. You're awesome. Now, the maintenance sometimes, very often, is even easier. We only change, in a lot of cases, the data files. For example, the texts that are updated, somewhere the dates have changed, so we change these files, or we change only the affected component variation. For example, if in contact preferences, only the Swedish variation was updated due to some business decision, what's not, we only update this spec file, and that's it. Again, it's all done. But that's not everything, of course. Let's say business decides we need to go live in the new brand and market, and of course, we want to have end-to-end automated test coverage to help with release and monitor and so on. So then we would go and add this new site in the config file, which is most important. Then we will pick which specs we will run based on our domain knowledge and after communicating with those teams, product owners, and so on. We will add the data where it's needed. Quite often we reuse existing data for existing markets, but sometimes there can be differences, of course. And the optional step is that if we have some component variation that is specific for this new site, we'll just add the new spec folder. So to summarize the benefits of this composable architecture, the main one, of course, it's maintainability. It's way easier to maintain this, not copy-pasting. It's the time to start the testing. So to spin up the first test run for the new site is quite short. And still it's quite flexible because if any site brand market has some very specific own feature, we can just cover it in a separate spec file.
Ooh, that is looking really interesting, Olex. That is kind of what I had in mind. I wonder, did we make any improvements at all? Do we have any numbers?
Yes, of course, we have some numbers. The tech is not teching now. No, yes, we have the numbers, all good here. So to compare our old approach and the new composable test architecture. So previously we had covered 17 sites. And in total, we had 425 spec files to cover those 70 files, which means in every full test run, we were running 425 specs. Now, since we are using the spec files in the new setup, we cover 35 sites with only 113 spec files instead of 425. And this is 3.7 times less spec files to cover and double amount the sites. And since we're choosing which spec to run and we're reusing the specs, we end up running around 178 specs across 35 sites instead of 425. And it gives us double the coverage. And I said around because I think we have more now, because we were developing, of course, throughout this time. That's not everything. So again, as I mentioned, time to test for the new site. So before, to spin up the automation for the new site, it was taking us from one full working day up to 1 week. Copy pasting is difficult, But after, currently with new, it takes us from 30 minutes up to 1 day. So we went from days to hours. And again, that's not all. The maintenance efforts, now it's a little bit complicated, so please bear with me. So the amount of changes required in the pull requests, it went down exponentially. And why? Because, for example, we have one common change in all the sites. In our previous setup, one site equals the number of files to update. So if we have 20 sites with the same change, we had to update 20 files with the same change. Now, in new setup, the number of specs per component is the number of files we need to update. So if we have 20 sites, but we are covering those with only 2 specs, then we need to update only 2 files, and that's it. That's all the maintenance. And of course, in the same, it's easier to perform this maintenance work. Smaller pull requests are way easier to review, and in the whole automation team happiness has increased, which is very important. Are there any struggles with this new architecture? You see, there is none. It's perfect, right?
Is that true?
I wish I could say so, but no. There are still some struggles. So we need to be very careful when we do any changes in the common spec files, of course. So if we do change in one common spec file, we need to run it for all the sites to make sure that everything is in order and we haven't broken anything. With this, sometimes we get merge conflicts because the whole team is working in one repository. It might happen that we update the same files and then we get merge conflicts. No one likes to resolve merge conflicts, so not that good. And anyway, we still have some small differences with the sites, and we ended up with having some conditions here and there in spec files or in some object files. It depends. And given the depth of testing we do, maintaining still all these 35 sites is still a big challenge.
Yeah, so sounds like we've come very far, but we've still got a very long way to go, Alex. But we can wrap up this presentation. So in this presentation, we've seen the basics of our end-to-end testing strategy and how and why splitting our tests into the different components can still give us the end-to-end confidence in our customer journeys. Olex also talked us through the previous setup where we were doing a lot of copy and pasting and repeating specs between the brand and market combinations. And then we also presented the composable test architecture, or informally the shopping test architecture, because that's we like shopping. And we've seen some benefits of this one as well. It's quite impressive that we've reduced the number of files. We've increased the coverage, and we've gone spinning up the test suites from days to hours, and we have reduced the maintenance. But we still have challenges. So what are our challenges now? So I've talked before about our department setup, and that Olex and I are in the TNT team. And we're working across the verticals. We are doing the tests for the high-risk releases, and they are outside of the development teams. However, the development teams inside the verticals, they are developing the components and releasing independently. When these releases are happening, we only find out about them when they hit our test environments and we notice the changes. And this isn't ideal because we're not being very proactive in that case. So what we want to do is be able to shift the ownership of these high risk testing to the teams so that they can keep updated alongside the development lifecycle of the component. And then yes, it will be shifting the ownership to the development teams. Then to be able to run the whole test suite, we will have a central pipeline that will trigger the tests across the different teams. And this would compose the test suite for the full brands and markets. And since the development teams would be maintaining those tests and with our help and so on, they will be kept up to date. And then ourselves as TNT would be shifting to more of a governance and audit team just for the purpose of making sure that we are following that overall end-to-end test strategy. And when we are composing the tests from the different teams, we still get that end-to-end coverage. And of course, with some requirements that might be coming from the business as well. So yes, that is what it looks like going forward for us. So yeah, wish us luck. Yeah, we're ready for questions, but also comments and suggestions. If you have any ideas on how we can be doing better, it would be very helpful. And when we were at Automation Star, the conference live, we had some very interesting chats with people there at our roundtable, and we got some interesting suggestions. I wonder what comes out today. Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you so much for your talk. I really like this talk. It's like so practical in so many ways. And yeah, comments are welcome. Thank you so much for that. But there's also questions. So if you're okay, I will jump into them so that we can go through it. And we have the first one here by Matt. It's thank you for the great talk. Do you also have test automation for the surrounding data integration, the ETL jobs? If so, what test tools do you use for that?
So that's a very good question. The way we are set up, data is a separate department, and even though we collaborate with it a little bit, I don't take care of the testing strategy for data, unfortunately. So I don't have a proper answer for that. We do make sure that from our platform that we send out the correct analytics events, and we have some tests for that in the components, but we do not test data and the integrations. Maybe the only bit of the data integration we test is just that we're sending out the correct data to our analytics department. I don't think I have a better answer for that, unfortunately.
Yes.
Thank you so much for that. We have a question from Carolina here. It's how are you handling versioning of the test code to align with components versions if components are in different versions on different sites?
Oh, excellent question, Carolina. We don't talk a lot about this in the talk, but it's actually more going the way forward, and we're not there yet with handling the versioning. So, but we do have plans for it. And the way we're thinking of doing it, there are two possibilities that we're evaluating. One of them is having the tests themselves sitting inside the component repositories. And then we need a process so that when the component is updated, the tests are updated with it and they're always versioned together. So it's inside the component repository. Then from a central pipeline, we trigger the tests of every component repository. And of course, we need to make sure we're following the end-to-end strategy. And then there is another way of potentially doing it. Some of our teams have tests that are sitting outside of the component repository. then it's possible to map the versions. So from the test code to the component code, we would map against the versions, and we do that. But today, actually, we do not handle this. It's one of the ways going forward that we're doing. So it's part of my plans on doing this. So far, we have the different options, but this is still in the early stages, to be honest. Yeah. If you have suggestions on this, by the way, I'm all ears, Carolina.
Thank you so much for that one. We have another question here, and that is from Simon or Simon. It's Super Talk. Thanks so much. Do you include cosmetic UI checks as part of your E2E suite, or are they separate? If separate, do they follow a similar structure?
Okay, good question as well, Simon. So, talking a bit about the purpose of our team, it's we handle the high risk testing, and because of that, we don't consider superficial UI parts high risk unless they're really covering part of the functionality. So for our team, TNT, it's not within our scope of testing to consider that. However, those superficial cosmetic parts, the cosmetic UI parts, my view is that they can be tested inside the teams who are testing the components more thoroughly and have more knowledge of that information. So in our case, unless it's something that's business critical or compliance or legal critical, we're not testing it ourselves because that's the scope of our team. But these parts, they can be tested inside the teams. Do they follow a similar structure? Some teams I know do it, some teams don't. But we do not have any guideline on standardizing this. And yeah, to be honest, I do like teams having some of their own autonomy with how they would do this. So we don't, and I wouldn't do it standardized either. So I would leave it to the teams to deal with that part themselves.
Thank you so much. Talking about teams, we have a question here from Matt. Taking care of people, how do your testers feel about shift ownership to development teams? How has the transition been for them?
Maybe Olex can talk about this one.
Okay, I can start. You can back me up just in case. But we have started this journey. So far, we have covered a couple of teams because we are taking it team by team, and we are starting from the teams where we see they might benefit the most from actually our help. And well, it's not everywhere, of course, flowers and roses, but in general, I think it's working fine. The thing is, like, when we come in and, for example, we start from reviewing what teams are actually testing, it happens very often that they might have wider test coverage for their specific mini app feature or their area of ownership, but they don't cover all the sites. For example, they take some kind of a different, rather risk-based approach or business risk approach, and they don't cover all the sites. But for high-risk testing, compliance testing, regulatory testing, we need to cover everything. Right? We cannot be non-compliant just because some site has small audience. This is unacceptable. So when this happens, sometimes we uncover some processes that with the development teams don't actually make these features quite testable everywhere in the same way. So when this happens, this is actually when Abigail comes to help us. And we deal it in the best way so that the team feels they're still autonomous, we feel we are compliant, and we have a possibility to run the test in the end and to get the results.
Yeah, but I think the question is like, do you feel like you're going to end up with not having much to do after we're finished moving the test? Do you think you're gonna not be busy?
Come on. Oh, we will always be busy, I believe, because we need to maintain central pipeline. We need anyway to review the test because this is some of the requirements for the high risk releases. And we have own new sites coming. What's not? There is always work to do.
Yeah, absolutely. And beyond that, so the team will be shifting to a more of a governance team where they will be doing audits and such. But then we also want to be keeping an eye on how do we continuously improve and optimize the department as well. So even if my department aren't writing tests, it will always be looking forward. For example, new tools, evaluating those and then introducing those, doing trainings, onboardings. What else? Even getting metrics. How can we improve the processes? How can we do things better to optimize what there is? I don't think the department is ever going to be running perfect. So I think we have a very, very long way to go, even when we manage to shift the ownership to the development teams. There is still a long, long, long way to go. We're only scratching the surface here. But yeah, I hope that answers.
Yeah, that's brilliant. We have from Carolina a follow up here. So one test suite for each site and very many sites. Do you have a copy in test environment for each site to run the tests on?
Do you have a copy in test environment for each site?
Oh,
We
you
do
mean?
have, we do have the sites on each test environment, if that's what you mean.
Yes.
Is that what Carolina means? I guess so.
I think yes, and yes, we have well, to answer in the same way that it was in the question. Yes, we have a copy of each site on each test environment.
Yeah. Yeah, let us know whether that's what you mean, Carolina. And feel free to have a chat with us after as
Yes.
well. And would love to connect on LinkedIn for those who'd like to and carry on the conversation.
Perfect. Thank you so much. We'll have one more question if you're okay with that. And it's from Vlatko. And it's, do you have geolocation testing? And if yes, how do you implement on CI/CD?
Not that I know of. I don't think we do have any geolocation testing ourselves.
No, we don't have geolocation testing.
Perfect. Thank you. Thank you. Thank you so much for being with us. Thank you so much for everyone that attended and for all the questions, all the comments. It's been great being here with you. And yeah, we hope to continue conversations with you. We have there your email, your social, anything else that you want to add?
It's been a blast. Thank you so much for having us, Joseph. And yeah, I do invite everyone to connect and carry on the conversation, answering more questions and so on. Thank you so much for joining.
Yes,
No,
I
thank
will
you.
join Abigail. Yes, thank you for having us today. Thank you for your attention and questions. And yeah, if you have something to adapt or any ideas or any question, please reach out either in email or LinkedIn. Because we don't have this live community in person. Maybe it's easier to approach in person, but we're always open to any suggestions. So let us know if you have any, and we can keep talking. Yes, thank you so much.
Thanks a million. Thanks to everyone. And we'll take a break right now. So uh, enjoy it, have a bit of time, and we'll meet again at 1 p.m. Central European Time with Almar Jurgens and Sustainable Execution. Which tests can we skip this time? Thank you, everyone. See you soon.
Thank you. Bye bye.